Picture this. You're staring down attack dogs. Fire hoses are blasting people off their feet. Police officers are beating peaceful protesters with clubs. Everything in your body is screaming at you to fight back, to match that violence with violence of your own. And honestly, who could blame you? For over 100 years, Black Americans had been told they were equal citizens while being treated as anything but. The promises were hollow. The injustice was real. The anger was justified. But Martin Luther King Jr. had a different plan, one that seemed almost crazy at the time. His secret weapon wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't anger or violence. It was something his opponents had absolutely no idea how to handle. King borrowed the concept from Gandhi, who'd used it to help free India from British rule. But let's be clear, this wasn't about being a pushover. King described it as aggressive spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. There was nothing weak about it. The foundation was a Greek concept called agape, a word for unconditional love that goes way beyond romantic feelings or even the love you have for your family. It's a deep, deliberate love for all people, including the ones trying to hurt you. Here's where it gets interesting. King's strategy was to separate the person from their actions. Love the person, hate what they're doing. The goal wasn't to crush your enemy or humiliate them. It was to win them over, to help them understand, to break that endless cycle where hate just breeds more hate. Now, this might sound purely philosophical, but King was being deeply practical. He understood human psychology. When you respond to violence with more violence, you just create more bitterness, more chaos, more reasons for the cycle to continue. But when you respond with calm, disciplined resistance, that's when something different happens. It creates moral tension. It forces people watching to see the stark difference between peaceful protesters and violent oppressors. And that wins hearts and minds across the entire country. King taught his followers what he called avoiding the internal violence of spirit. It wasn't just about not physically fighting back. It was about not even hating your opponent in your heart. That takes incredible mental discipline. He knew that if the movement got bitter and hateful, it would lose what made it so powerful, the moral high ground. As he put it, violence leaves emptiness and bitterness in its wake, but nonviolence creates the possibility for reconciliation and what he called the beloved community. In 1963, this philosophy faced its ultimate test in Birmingham, Alabama. If you wanted to find the most segregated, most violently racist city in America, Birmingham was it. The Commissioner of Public Safety, Bull Connor, was infamous for his brutality.
You can never whip these boys if you don't keep you and them separate. I found that out in Birmingham. You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
When protesters showed up, they weren't met with restraint. They were met with dogs, fire hoses, and clubs. King got arrested and thrown into solitary confinement. And while he was locked up in that cell, he got his hands on a newspaper with a public statement from 8 white clergymen. These were religious leaders who acknowledged that, yeah, racism was bad. But they were basically telling King to cut it out with the protests and just wait for the courts to fix things. Talk about a gut punch. Here he was, isolated in a jail cell, and even people who were supposed to be his allies were telling him he was the problem. These weren't segregationists or Bull Connor's thugs criticizing him. These were ministers, men of faith, people who should have understood. He had every reason to respond with rage, to write something scathing and bitter. Instead, he started writing on scraps of paper, whatever he could find. Newspaper margins, toilet paper, anything. His lawyers had to smuggle the pieces out. Those scraps became the letter from Birmingham jail, one of the most important documents of the entire 20th century. And it's a masterpiece, not because of its anger, but because of its remarkable restraint and clarity. The letter is brilliant, not because it's angry, but because it's not. He starts by addressing the clergymen respectfully as men of genuine goodwill. Then, he methodically, calmly, takes apart their arguments piece by piece. When they called him an outsider, he wrote one of the most famous lines in American history: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." When they told him to be patient, he explained what patience actually feels like when you're the one suffering. "For years now, I have heard the word wait," he wrote. "It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never." He described the reality of segregation, trying to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the amusement park, the degenerating sense of nobodiness that racism grinds into you day after day. He explained that nonviolent direct action wasn't about creating violence. It was about creating enough tension and crisis that a community that's been refusing to negotiate is finally forced to face the issue. He drew a distinction between negative peace, which is just the absence of conflict, and positive peace, which is actual justice. That letter got published across the country. What started as criticism of King became one of his most powerful moments, a perfect demonstration of his philosophy in action. A few months later came the big moment, the March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. The government was nervous. After what had happened in Birmingham, a lot of officials were worried this whole thing would turn into a riot. King was the final speaker. Standing in front of that enormous crowd, with the whole country watching, he knew he had to get this right. One wrong word could set everything off. We all know the "I have a dream" part, but what he said right before that is just as important. He spoke directly to the anger in that crowd. He said, "In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred." This was deliberate. This was strategy. He continued, "We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force." Instead of channeling rage, he channeled hope. He painted a picture of an America where the children of slaves and the children of slave owners could sit down together as brothers. The effect was electric and peaceful. No riots, no violence. President Kennedy was deeply impressed, and the march built crucial momentum toward passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Let's be absolutely clear about something. This philosophy wasn't passive. King said it explicitly. Nonviolence isn't for cowards. It's passive physically, but strongly active spiritually. Think about the courage this actually required. Civil rights activists had to train themselves to be insulted, spat on, and beaten without fighting back. King said, "The strong man is the man who will not hit back, who can stand up for his rights and yet not hit back." In echoing Gandhi, King laid it out. "We will match your capacity to inflict suffering with our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. Bomb our homes and threaten our children, and we will still love you. But we will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer." That's not surrender. That's a calculated strategy to win over hearts and minds, to win the larger battle for America's soul. So what was King's secret weapon? It was the strategic, deliberate disarming of his opponents through love. It was understanding that you can't drive out darkness with more darkness. Only light can do that. It was knowing that responding with anger just gives your oppressor an excuse for their violence, while disciplined calm exposes their brutality for everyone to see. King believed that hating your opponents wasn't just morally wrong, it was bad strategy. Hate fuels a never-ending cycle of revenge. Each act of violence justifies the next one. Each hateful word makes reconciliation harder. His approach aimed for something deeper, actual reconciliation, actual change that could last. By refusing to sink to the level of his attackers, he forced the fight onto higher moral ground where fire hoses and attack dogs were powerless against the force of a righteous idea. The images of peaceful protesters being brutalized shocked the nation's conscience in a way that a violent uprising never could have. It made it impossible for moderate Americans to look away or stay neutral. In our world today, where rage and division seem to define everything, where social media amplifies our anger and algorithms reward outrage, King's philosophy feels more relevant than ever. We're constantly being told that anger is the only appropriate response to injustice, that fighting fire with fire is the only way forward. King proved otherwise. He showed that the most powerful response to hate isn't more hate. It's courageous, strategic, unrelenting love. That doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean accepting injustice. It means fighting for what's right without becoming what you're fighting against. It means having the discipline and strength to stay on the moral high ground, even when everything in you wants to strike back. How can we apply that principle of soul force in our own lives and communities today? That's the question worth wrestling with.